Good evening, Law 501 students. I'm recording your announcement for this week, session 4, since it seemed to work for you last week. I hope it works for you again. Please notice when you take a look at this week's assignments that there are 2 chapters in the text that are designated as optional. Those chapters have to do with foreign corporations and with antitrust law, and while interesting to people who like that sort of thing, it's not meat and potatoes, run-of-the-daily mill kind of stuff that management might encounter and have to have some idea of how to respond to it. I hope that you've been able to take advantage of the optional additional material that I'm posting in the student lounge. Those are optional. They are not required by any means, but I do hope that you find them helpful. So, session 4. Your required chapters have to do with corporate finance, corporate powers and management, and securities regulation in more detail. Some of you started down these roads in your discussions in session 3, so hopefully you've already seen some of this sort of material in the reading and thinking and looking around on the internet that you've been doing. This will get more into how those things work in detail. You will have a discussion question that comes out of this material about securities violations for sales of securities on public exchanges. There are some pretty strict requirements on how information is disclosed about those companies so that purchasers of stocks and bonds can make fair and informed decisions based on accurate information about their investments. So that's what the discussion will be about. Then you will have a chapter that you must read after you skip 20 and 21. You'll get to 22, which is unfair trade practices and the Federal Trade Commission. So this is an area that usually is studied with torts. It's a bit like the tort of fraudulent misrepresentation. And the difference here is that most torts are common law, that is judge-made law, and hundreds of years old. This is more recent. This is statutory and regulatory law, which means it's written down and enacted by Congress in the case of a statute, or by a regulatory agency in the case of a regulation, once an enabling statute or an authorizing statute has been passed that allows the agency to make a regulation. So you will have an internet research assignment that asks you to briefly dip into a government website and find a little bit of information about regulations that you can access from that entry point. And then you will have a case study about deceptive trade practices or unfair trade practices. You will hear me use those terms interchangeably. Where I was first licensed in Texas, it was called the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, and here in Colorado, it's called the Unfair Trade Practices Act, and you find that terminology nationwide. Okay, so you have a case study assignment that says to analyze one of the cases at the end of section 22.5 of the text. Those cases are fine. You may choose to do one of those. I am offering you a third option. I have added this to the assignment folder. This is my first addition to the course materials that the university has provided. There was a significant case about 6 months ago decided by the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that affected those of us working in the area of cybersecurity. It involved the Wyndham Hotels, and it involved a credit card data breach. So I am offering that case to you as a third option from which you may choose. You need to only brief and respond to questions about one case. You don't need to do all 3. You can choose which one you want, but I'm offering you this third choice in case you find a modern case on cybersecurity more interesting than the cases that are in the text. Um, I've given you the URLs in the assignment folder that you would need to use to find the opinion on the internet and the FTC's website blurb about the case. You're free to do any other research, of course, as you always are free to do, and as the rubric encourages you. So there's your overview for session 4. I can't emphasize enough how important the rubrics and the rubric feedback is. I am noticing that many of you are frequently leaving behind points in your assignments because there are things the rubric is asking you to do that you are not doing. And if you're not doing them, I can't give you points for them. So please, please, please check the rubrics. I have made no changes to these rubrics from the ones that the university provides. They should be very familiar to you. They include, in the written communication one that I use on case studies, elements like introduction and conclusion. Do you have a strong thesis statement? Development and evidence, of course, and critical thinking, but also language and mechanics, which includes things like grammar and sentence structure and punctuation. And it includes sections for critical self-reflection and integration of faith. I highlight thesis, critical self-reflection, and integration of faith because these are the elements that are most often just entirely missing from some of the responses I've received on assignments, and that is really hurting people. So please, please, please take a look at those rubrics, take a look at the feedback I've given you. I want you to succeed in this course, but there's really no way to do it without reading the text and without following the rubrics. So please know that I'm wishing you well as always, praying for you this week, and hoping that you'll do well with this material. Good night and God bless.